Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is CityWorks, a broadcast produced by the School of Labor and Urban Studies at the City University of New York in partnership with CUNY TV. It's a show that explores the challenges faced by working people in New York and other urban centers. On this edition of CityWorks, we'll speak with Dr. Janet Gornick, senior scholar at the Stone Center on Socioeconomic Inequality, a faculty member at the Graduate Center of CUNY, and a leading voice on the nation's broken welfare state, and especially the devastating impact of this failure during the COVID-19 pandemic. But first, we're going to screen a short reported by Minnie Roh featuring 3 workers and what the pandemic has brought to their lives. All of us have stories of the hardships of COVID-19. See how these stories of these workers intersect.
It's a Saturday night, I think.
Jillian Escobar is doing what she loves best, making people look beautiful.
It's all about the passion, like I love doing hair, I love helping people.
But when the pandemic hit, Bellezza, the hair salon where she works, was forced to shutter its doors.
How am I going to pay for the bills? How I was going to get income? You know, my boss didn't really know if we were able to get unemployment.
The same was the case for local restaurants like Francesca Brick Oven Pizza and Pasta.
It was all within like this 1 hour, I remember, of realizing everything. Schools are closed, and that means we don't have orders coming in for the school. I realized right away all catering would stop, graduation parties. Like I was thinking ahead into the summertime of what would happen, and I knew right away that that would be gone.
Reina and Escobar joined millions of other Americans who had their lives upended due to coronavirus. Unemployment rates shot up across the country. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor, nearly 50 million people were out of a job during the height of the pandemic. That includes close to a third of all workers in personal care and service occupations, and 1 in 4 food preparation or serving related fields. The entertainment industry was also decimated, particularly on Broadway. Theaters went dark in March, and production won't pick up again until June 2021.
I'm on unemployment. The union still covering my health and welfare.
Frank Alter, a union carpenter, is one of the nearly 100,000 workers who contributed daily to the multi-billion-dollar economic powerhouse that is Broadway.
Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton.
None of the pandemic or the unemployment or any of the relief was really enough for anybody to survive on.
He says he knows that Broadway will come back. Until then, he and his colleagues just have to hang on a little bit longer.
I'd be breaking out my old framing hammer and my nail guns, and I'd be back to building houses and renovations.
At the salon where Escobar works, stations are 6 feet apart and separated by plexiglass. Instead of a handshake or a hug, clients are greeted with a temperature check and a squirt of hand sanitizer. Escobar, who contracted and beat COVID, says she's just grateful to be back at work to support herself and her daughter.
Seeing my clients again and just the smile on their face you may not see it underneath their mask, but you could tell in their eyes and just how they leave here. It's just like, this is the new norm.
And while Reina admits he had some sleepless nights worrying about whether his business would survive, Francesca's weathered the storm, thanks to creative, out-of-the-box ideas like do-it-yourself pizza kits and homeschool meal plans.
I feel like the DIY pizza kits that we did, or just being able to order pizza at home, was normal. It was like the highlight of the day, like, oh, the food is here, or when you're eating, when the food gets delivered to you, even though some contactless delivery stuff, when it comes to you, you eat it. At that moment, you could kind of forget that there is a pandemic. You're at home with your family eating dinner, you got takeout food, and That's a good day in my book.
I'm Minnie Roh for CityWorks.
We'll speak with reporter Minnie Roh later in the broadcast. Now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Janet Gornick. Welcome, Janet, to CityWorks. We're really glad to have you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
We're in a tense moment, feels like on a little bit of a precipice. What's front and center of your mind in your area of work all these months into this pandemic and general chaos of 2020?
Well, of course, I'm extremely concerned about the election. Maybe we'll come back to that a little bit later. The stories that we just heard, of course, are heartbreaking. I think it's important to focus on the coronavirus pandemic, but to remember that it really, what we've seen in terms of the catastrophic hardship in terms of health and economic crisis, what we've seen is really conditioned by and a continuation of the extremely weak safety net that was in place, at the baseline. So the pandemic hit very suddenly, say for us, for the most part in February and March. The economy shut down almost overnight. Our colleague at CUNY, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman has described it as putting the economy in a medically induced coma, meaning, of course, that it was sort of turned off suddenly in ways that recessions and depressions don't usually work. And, it wasn't a lack of demand and so forth. But that also implies that when the pandemic recedes and with the proper supports, we can sort of turn it back on. Let's hope so. But the important thing I want to say now is that there's no country in the world that had a social protection system in place enough to eradicate all hardship when COVID hit. But the United States was in especially bad shape.
How so?
Well, when you think of it, the pandemic hit, we had no universal health insurance. We have no universal child care. We have no federal policy of paid sick leave. We have no paid family leave. Because of the lack of unions and many other things, a low minimum wage, we have a huge low wage sector in the labor market, much more than in other countries. So lots of workers were already on the razor's edge. So, it's almost a cliche by now, but to say that we had a safety net with big holes in it, holes bigger than in many other rich countries. And when the pandemic hit, huge millions of workers simply fell through the bottom of that net, just fell through the holes.
What do we know about the statistics at this point?
In terms of the economy?
Yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing we know, obviously, is that there's been enormous job loss. And of course, we saw that through the spring, and I think we're going to see, a second and third wave of job loss. We saw reduced hours among those who remained in the labor market. And of course, we know huge numbers, an uptick just in this month in unemployment claims. There's a story in the New York Times just now that just came out reporting the really devastating finding that 8 million people have entered poverty since May, basically when the first round of federal protections ticked out. They were temporary and they haven't been replaced. And 8 million people have fallen into poverty since May because of the collapse in the labor market, but really more so, I would say doubly, because the federal government has absolutely failed to protect these families. We know from looking abroad, and we know from before, the federal government could be providing much more aid to families. We put a lot in place in March. It did a huge amount of good, but it all sunsetted, and nothing has happened since really. And the Senate is stalling it all right now. So the point of all this is that, there's been a failure of aid from Washington in terms of cash relief, in terms of paying employers to keep people on the payroll, and people are falling out of work. And of course, unemployment is running out for many of them. And now we're seeing just this increase in poverty, which is extremely worrisome.
The statistics that you mentioned are chilling. And when you dig into the racial disparities, it's just daunting to imagine how some communities come back from this. Already people are talking about recovery, an unequal recovery, perhaps the most unequal, but a recovery. I'm not sure the statistics suggest that some of the people that we've just been talking about are recovering yet at all.
Communities of color have been hit incredibly hard. The first thing we realized almost instantly is that the health crisis itself hit communities of color in way disproportionately. And we know that for many, many reasons. There have been some very good work done on this. People of color hold jobs that put them more at risk. They were they had fewer opportunities. to work remotely, putting them on public transportation and so forth, lack of health insurance, many things that some colleagues of mine in the public health world have done some wonderful analyses explaining there's about 15 different reasons that people of color were hit harder from a health perspective. And that, of course, compounded the economic losses, because when someone is sick, of course, and when their family members are sick and dying, of course, it pulls them away from paid work. And then the kinds of jobs that people of color hold, they are disproportionately in retail, service, and so forth, the sectors that were hit really hard. So there's no question. And, yet again, Laura, one of the things that I've sort of been stressing is in a sad way, although the coronavirus pandemic is catastrophic and shocking, there's very little that it has revealed about inequality that should surprise us, because it was all in place. The building blocks for this inequitable, response, the consequences being so inequitable, that was all in place on the eve of the pandemic in terms of the kind of jobs that people hold, income, housing, schooling, the inequities were there, and they've just exploded as the pandemic, has hit families differentially. And you're absolutely correct that, a large share of households and workers have been cushioned by their income and the types of jobs that they hold, but that kind of privilege was not equally distributed before COVID hit.
We'll take a short break and continue our discussion with Professor Janet Gornick after this. You're watching CityWorks.
The CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies is the 25th and newest school under the CUNY umbrella. Dedicated to public service and social justice, the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies offers undergraduate and graduate degrees in the areas of labor studies and urban studies, and certificate programs in labor relations, public administration and public policy, healthcare policy and administration, and community leadership. We pride ourselves on being an institution that brings together activists and academics. Find out more at slu.cuny.edu.
We're back with Professor Janet Gornick. So, Janet, we're at that part of the program where I'm going to ask, what need we do? And not just us, although we'll get to that, but what do we need government to do in this moment? You started this conversation today by saying our so-called safety net was already inadequate, and what there was of it was in shreds even before COVID-19 hit. So what does that imply for our demands and needs at this moment?
I think if we really want to put together an institutional arrangement that provides a decent level of support for workers and their families, first of all, we need universal health insurance, which is imperiled now. We all know that. We need universal child care. We need much more investment in primary, secondary, and higher education. We need a stronger system of public supports for poor families, and many other things. And the other thing I would really stress, and I think the setting where you are at CUNY now, it's important to mention this, we have an incredibly weak set of protections for workers. So I'm not talking about cash and financial protection, I'm just talking about regulation, that the labor market in the US is like the Wild West. So just briefly to remind people, or to tell people who don't know this, in the European Union and the 28 countries of the European Union, it is illegal to discriminate against part-time workers. They can't be paid less than full-time workers in comparable work. Legislation is in place recently, new legislation, protecting people from being sent home with no pay when they've turned up at their shift, protecting people from so-called zero-hour contracts. The UK, in fact, just put in some really important legislation. A zero-hour contract, these are growing in the US as well. Somebody works, say, for a home health care agency, and weeks go by, they're on call and they have no hours, so they have no earnings. And these jobs have exclusivity components, so they're not allowed to have another job. And countries have been putting in place regulations to disallow this. So it sounds a little bit obscure, but the fact is a lot of American workers have very non-standard jobs and non-standard hours, and they have absolutely no protection. And that's just due to a lack of imagination, because the regulatory designs are perfectly well understood and operate perfectly well without harming the labor markets in other countries.
Lack of imagination or lack of pressure? I mean, it didn't happen in the UK and Europe just because the water is more worker friendly.
Well, yes, absolutely. I think it's both, actually. It's interesting why you've asked that question. There's no question that the political landscape in the United States is famously hostile to redistribution, to regulation. You know, we know that we've been in a profoundly conservative era since 1980 and are now in a chaotically conservative era that I think many of us hope will come to a close soon. So there's no question that the politics are not friendly, but there's a lot of social protection and worker protection in countries that are really no less conservative than the United States. And part of the reason that I say it's a lack of imagination, the last thing I want to do, and I don't mean to at all, is to blame progressives for the lack of policy. But I spend a lot of time talking to progressives who've never heard of these policy options.
Well, it's a very important point that you're making. And we are also talking at a very important moment in this country's history on the verge of an election. I think you and I would probably both agree that elections don't make all the difference, but they do make a lot of difference. What do you think is at stake right here, right now, as we're speaking?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it's so hard to say anything that doesn't sound like a terrible cliche. I do believe this is the most important election of my life. I'm well over the age of 60. I have voted in many elections. I've never remembered anything feeling this consequential. And I think we know it's not just because of what's happened in terms of policy in recent years. It's because of this chaos that's come out of the White House and the damage to, to so many institutions, the corruption in the Justice Department, the State Department, our public health agencies, and now this tremendous tragedy that's unfolding in terms of the Supreme Court, which is, we're looking at decades and decades of consequence. So I think that leaving aside even the policy landscape, this White House has got to go because of the danger there. Now, at the same time, I think policy really matters. And so let me just say the following from a policy perspective. For the Democrats to regain the White House is crucial, but it's also crucial for the Democrats to regain the Senate and to hold the House. Without any of those three pieces, it will be difficult to move forward. So if I could just fantasize for a moment, if the Biden-Harris administration wins and is allowed to take office, if the Democrats take the Senate, and I think we know they'll hold the House, I think we know we're going to see a relief package immediately. We're going to see financial aid looking like the CARES Act. We will see aid to workers and small employers. We'll see protections against the loss of health insurance. In the short term, we'll see protections against foreclosure for homeowners, against eviction, a massive wave of renters eviction otherwise is going to hit this winter. And then when the pandemic is stabilized and the economy recovers, which it will, I think we're going to see, if we are so fortunate as to have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president, I think we will see a new version of Obamacare, Biden-Harris care. It will be designed to escape some of the court challenges that have been so devastating.
There has, though, been a lot of talk, including from the top of the Democratic ticket, about a return to normal, or normalcy, as they say. What you said at the very beginning is that a return to the status quo ante all of this before wouldn't be enough. Returning to normal, is that what you would like to see? Is that the best you think we can do?
Well, that's a very well phrased concerning question. I think we first need to return to normal. In other words, the obvious is to get out of this dreadful public health and economic crisis. But absolutely, that's absolutely correct, that normal baseline was not adequate. I've been working in the field of social policy design for 40 years. We haven't seen the gains that we would have hoped for. There have been important gains. The Affordable Care Act was enormously important. The earned income tax credit was important. We've certainly seen important social safety net features that have been put in place in recent decades, but that's absolutely correct. The baseline is totally inadequate in the United States, and it has been for a long time.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Perhaps we'll be able to get you to come back and revisit your thoughts on the socioeconomic dynamics of 2021 and the future workers face in the months ahead. Thank you so much, Professor Gornick.
Thank you.
Non-essential, that category could spell economic disaster for millions in New York and across the country. What happened to a small business owner designated as non-essential as the pandemic struck? Again, we asked reporter Minnie Roh to look for answers. This is the story of how one proprietor kept himself and his family afloat. Take a look.
On any given day, you can find Brian Kuhl at Shades of Soho, creating beautiful lampshades for his customers, just like he's done for the past 10 years in the small town of Glen Rock, New Jersey. But when COVID-19 struck, like millions of other Americans, he was forced to shut his doors and suddenly found himself unable to make a living.
I don't have much time to freak out. I don't have much of a safety net.
In despair, Kuhl emailed a neighbor, who happens to be the Attorney General of New Jersey, Grubier Graywall.
I emailed him and I said, there are a lot of Brians out there. And when I say that, that means if you shut down non-essential businesses, I will lose my business, I will lose my home.
Then Kuhl turned to the internet, looking for ideas to make money. That's when he saw a Facebook post from a friend who was immunocompromised and needed help getting groceries.
I called her and said, hey, do you want me to deliver food to you? It turned out I didn't deliver food to her, but in a conversation with her, it all kind of just birthed.
Within a day, Kuhl created Bergen Brings, a grocery and medication delivery service. With people increasingly hesitant to shop for groceries, not to mention the long lines just to get in the door, the timing was perfect for this new business venture.
This morning, apparently, I saved some kid with an asthma attack. Yesterday, I got a pregnant woman who could not stop throwing up medicine. A lot of people feel bad asking me to do this. Even people that I had a lot of repeat customers already. And they're always like, I feel bad contacting you. And I'm like, don't. This is my new business right now. This is my business. I appreciate the business. I need it.
At the height of the pandemic, Kuhl was in such high demand he was working 10 to 12 hours every day. He did everything he could to keep himself and his customers safe. He wore gloves, disinfected his carts before and after every shop, and he made one supermarket trip per customer.
It was either stay home, not go out, and lose everything. But I was really hesitant to put the word out. I thought there'd be backlash on my store. How could I go out? I'm going to be spreading the disease. I'm going to be going store to store. Oddly enough, everybody instantly was like, thank God you're doing this. Good for you. Really great feedback.
Kuhl was successful in pivoting from lampshade designer to personal shopper, but many others across America didn't fare as well, and the economic impact was immediate. On March 9th, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged over 2,000 points, the largest one-day drop in history. Within the first week of the quarantine, 3.3 million people filed for unemployment. By May 2020, that number had swelled to 20 million, levels comparable to the Great Depression.
Honestly, I think it's going to take the people that were already struggling, which is a lot of mom and pop stores in any town USA. I think it's gonna be a lot of ghost towns, a lot of empty storefronts.
Thanks to Bergen Brings, Kuhl weathered the unstable financial times during the pandemic. He says his biggest hardship was missing out on an unexpected side effect that others were enjoying: spending time with his family. I
want to sit in the basement and record my son playing music and hear what he says. I don't want to have to come home at 9:30 at night and just be like, dude, I'm exhausted. I can't, I got to do paperwork now for tomorrow. I don't have time to hear this awesome thing that you put together. And I always knew I loved my wife and son tremendously, but I did it for them.
He is also doing it for the love of his community that had always supported him and Shades of Soho.
But I really thought about it, and I was like, I think I'm flattening the curve. And I'll tell you now, in hindsight, I do believe I am. Because I've done over 65 orders in 12 days. That is 65 less people that have been out. I'm proud of what I'm doing. really proud.
As there doesn't seem to be an end to the pandemic in the foreseeable future, Poole says he plans to continue Bergen Brings alongside Shades of Soho. I'm Minnie Roh for CityWorks.
With hotspots cropping up and virus on the rise in many states, the burden on small business owners will continue. So how is Brian Kuehl doing today? How many people can be expected to adapt in this way? For answers to those questions, we go to CityWorks reporter Minnie Roh. I almost hesitate to ask, have you checked in with Brian since this was shot? Is he still doing okay?
I have. I actually just spoke to him a couple of days ago. He's doing really well. He says he's still working at Bergen Brings because unfortunately the pandemic is still ongoing. So there is still quite a need out there.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching CityWorks. We'll be back in December with a post-election reporter roundtable. If you have questions or comments, you can reach us at CityWorks. That's cityworks@slu.cuny.edu. For CityWorks, I'm Laura Flanders.